Welcome to Face2Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face2Face. So my next interview is with Hao Wu, and we talk about his new film, and I'm going to say it, it's a brilliant, it's breathtaking, it's emotional, it's human. His new film, 76 Days, and I had a great time chatting with Hao about the complexities of the actual filmmaking process, how he had to kind of co-direct it and create it from a long way away. And there were several people involved. And, you know, with any film project, there's always more going on than meets the eye. And 76 Days is a film that you're going to need to see. It's going to be out very soon in digital theaters in North America and coming soon, hopefully, to an international theater near you as well. This is a film about similarity through difference. And, you know, it's really, in my mind, a film like any great documentary. It's layered and it peels back so many layers. And as Hao said, he just had a really simple sort of approach. He wanted to tell a very personal, and I'm going to add poetic story about what's going on and what was going on in Wuhan. And we get to see footage from 4 different hospitals. We get to see some very eerie footage, actually, of a locked down city of I think he said 9 or 11 million people. This is just the scale of this issue, as we all now know, was and is still global, and it's mind-boggling on a lot of levels. But what's so beautiful about this film is the personal edge. This is about community. It's about it makes contact with reality in very human and tangible and thoughtful ways. And if you aren't moved to tears at some of the scenes, I'll be amazed. And it's one of the most breathtaking and beautiful endings to a film I've seen in a long time. And there's a few favorites of mine, that films that have these great endings. And Last Night by Don McKellar is one for sure that comes to mind, a narrative film back in 1999. And 76 Days definitely is on that list as well. It's a powerful, powerful film. And as Hao will say, he really wanted people's stories to speak for themselves. And so I hope you're in. I hope you're going to listen to the interview. It's fascinating. Hao's a wonderful guy. Lots to talk about. And again, it's one of those conversations that I just didn't want it to end. And that's one of the beautiful and also upsetting things about doing face-to-face and doing this kind of work. You get to meet folks, and sometimes only for about 30 or 45 minutes, but isn't that still a wonderful thing? So thanks, Hao, for joining us on Face-to-Face. If you are enjoying what I'm doing here, make sure you probably made it here, by the way, through iTunes or Spotify or something like that. Check us out on face2facelive.ca for more interviews. Sign up for the newsletter. You're going to want to check out what we've got there. Well over 535 interviews, lots coming up. Looking forward to an amazing 2021 as well. And if you like what we're doing, please leave a review for us on iTunes or Spotify. And the more we're recognized, the better. And it's amazing what a little social media will do. Share it with your friends. Sign up for the newsletter. Like I said, like us on YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 followers on YouTube. And it's something I haven't really pushed in the past, but follow us there. We're well over a couple 100,000 views, but we just don't have the membership we need to really get recognized, which would be a huge thing for us here at Face2Face. So please do that. And if you want to advertise with us, reach out. We can help you with that as well. And don't forget, for all you readers who like actual books, a copy of Real Change is Incremental is available at davidpecklive.com, where you can also learn a little bit more about my writing and speaking. But last note before we step into this conversation with how historical film and historical conversation, in my opinion, don't forget to like us in a digital way, iTunes or Spotify, and we would appreciate it. There is a contest coming up in the near future for that, so stay tuned. But coming up right now is my conversation with Hao Wu about his new film, 76 Days. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We are joined by a very special guest here with us today. I'm not 100% sure where he's calling in from, but I think it's Eastern Standard Time. We have Hao Wu here to talk about his brilliant and timely and important new film, 76 Days. Hao, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, David. I'm calling from New York City.
You're calling from New York City. I thought that was the bridge in the background, but I wasn't sure. Yeah.
No, that's actually San Francisco. You must zoom
Oh,
back.
there you go. San Francisco. Sorry about that, you West Coasters. Yeah, that's my deep apologies to. And what's so funny is how no one can see what we're referring to. So it's perfect. Isn't that the beauty of a podcast? How you were at the Toronto International Film Festival. You've had a digital tour of sorts. I would imagine all kinds of interviews and Q&As. Tell us a little bit about 76 Days. And I would imagine most people already have a bit of an understanding about the film. And can I say congratulations as well? It is a beautiful and moving film, a real moving document, a testament to the fact that we are all in this together.
Yeah, thank you, David, for your kind words. 76 Days is an observational documentary that really showcases what happened on the front line in Wuhan in 4 different hospitals during the 76 days of lockdown. Back in the lockdown starting in late January and officially ended in early April. So the film provided an unvarnished view of some of the early horror, despair, and panic, and as well as later on when the situation started stabilized, and how a group of medical workers and patients help each other to survive the lockdown and the pandemic.
How did you get drawn into this? I mean, this is a film that you directed essentially from 10,000 kilometers away. And I remember a film a few years ago that I was fortunate enough to interview on Silvered Water. I don't know if you've seen that, but a film about Syria, and Osama Mohammed was directing it from Paris. He was directing a woman on the ground and cell phone footage and archival footage, and they put together this really stunning piece. Can you talk a little bit about how you got pulled in and how that played out, even from a communicative perspective, the emails, the phone calls? It must have been difficult to manage.
Yeah, thanks for this great question. So first of all, I'm not the only director. I'm one of
Yes.
the 3 co-directors. I remote directed in New York City. I also edited the whole film. I have 2 other collaborators who were filming separately. They didn't know each other, and separately at different hospitals in Wuhan. So I reached out to them and asked them to collaborate. And in the end, the 3 of us decided to work together and make a feature-length documentary. So normally in my past films, I always focus on more character-driven stories. I usually shy away from newsy topics because personally as a filmmaker, I'm always worried that what else can I bring in terms of storytelling to a topic that's being well covered in the news media. But with COVID-19, it's pretty personal. My partner and I were planning to take our 2 kids, to fly from New York to Shanghai to spend Chinese New Year with my family in Shanghai. Our flight was supposed to depart on January 23rd. So 24 hours before our departure time, we learned about this lockdown in Wuhan. And then we were kind of freaking out. We didn't know what was happening in China, what the lockdown meant, because it was such a draconian measure to lock down an entire city of 11 million people in Wuhan. And pretty soon after, the government actually locked down the entire province of Hubei province. That's over 20 million people. So, but then after much agonizing, I decided to fly back myself. I canceled tickets for the rest of my family. And I spent Chinese New Year with my parents and my sister's family locked in our apartments in Shanghai, and just like being really confused and scared. And also, like, it was also very eerie experience watching an entire city of 21 million people just shut down like that during China's normally very busy family holiday. And so that, and then when I was reading on social media just every day, because we were locked inside of the apartment, so all we could do was watching TV and scrolling social media. And just reading about the news in Wuhan, knowing how horrible it was on the front line, and just like people were asking each other, how could the government have, you know, not told us anything about this? How could the situation have become so horrible? So I think the entire country was angry. So as soon as I came back to the US, and the US network approached me, asked me if I would be interested in making a film about COVID-19. It was called coronavirus back then. It wasn't officially a global pandemic. I jumped in because I feel like that has affected me personally. And even though later on the US network dropped the project, I still continue because as the filming went ahead, the story became even more personal as my grandpa was diagnosed with late-stage liver cancer a week after Chinese New Year, and he passed away in March. And I couldn't
Sorry
even
to
go
hear that.
back to. Thank you. I couldn't even go back to China at that time because the severe restriction in inbound travel by China at that time.
You know, it's interesting. I work in international development, and I've been asked the question before, how do you get people interested in another part of the world? Obviously storytelling, narrative, creating empathy, showing films like yours, 76 Days. I think I really do think that the genius of the common thread of humanity really comes through in this film in so many ways. The surgical gloves with the get well soon on them. I mean, talk about just saying, isn't this what we all are hoping for and looking towards, no matter who we are, no matter what country, what city we come from. So I wonder, would you have made this film if you hadn't have gone and actually kind of experienced some of that emotional and sort of existential upheaval firsthand?
Absolutely. I think, even with the same amount of footage, different filmmakers would approach the storytelling very differently. They would pick different scenes and different shots. I think, first of all, going back to your previous question, so once I decided to make the film, I reached out to the filmmakers on the ground who had been filming in Wuhan. I talked to over a dozen. I saw their rushes before I found my two collaborators and decided to collaborate with them. So at that time, they will upload the footage onto the cloud. I would download them in New York, and then I'll review the rushes and have some conversation with them about where to take the character, where to take the story. But they were making most of the decisions on the ground because the
Right.
things were extremely chaotic in the beginning, and whatever we decided or discussed might be different a day or two later on. Um, Meanwhile, I was also reaching out to filmmakers in other countries as well, because in the beginning I wasn't sure where to take the story, take the film. And once the pandemic hit New York, I started filming in New York City myself. For a while, I struggled with how big the story that. A story that the film would cover. But I think, as you were mentioning, I think what drew me keep on going back, like what resonated with me the most was, I guess, the China stories, the footage coming out of Wuhan, for two reasons. One is because I have a lot of personal connection, right, to China. My family is being affected big time. And secondly, it's because my two co-director, they have shot amazing footage, which is so rare. Even nowadays, I don't believe we've seen such raw and emotional visual evidence to the damage the pandemic has done to people from anywhere. Even like, there's been footage, some visual footage on CNN or on BBC and Sky TV, but not as coherently as a story, like a movie, personal narrative. So I think, yeah, because I had a personal experience, that's why gradually as I started editing, I'm gradually reaching the decisions that rather than trying to tell a big global story or to compare Wuhan's response and New York's response, I should just focus on one city's experience, even in just more specifically about this group of people in the hospitals as they try to survive this pandemic. Because I truly, after having experienced the trip to China, having to manage living in New York when New York City was locked down, quote unquote lockdown, or sheltering in place, I see a lot of similarity. So that's why we decided to really using a more specific group of characters about to tell their stories as well to tell the more global, more universal stories.
Yeah, it's well, it strikes. I wonder how did you step into this story thinking of the notion of similarity through difference? Was that something that you had in mind? Because for me, it really comes out in the film that again, this sense of commonality of shared human experience, and now we see how COVID has spread around the world and the damage it's doing and so on, and how different people are responding to it. But what I love so much about your film, so many things, but what I love is that it gives us a bird's eye view, an actual narrative relational view into the hottest spot for COVID, and how not only this country dealt with it, but how these individuals were dealing with it, and it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, thank you. I do believe, I think that my idea about how, similar the pandemic responses or experience across the globe was really came into being as I was really reading the news, watching the news coming from everywhere. And I think it really helped reach out to many, many filmmakers across the globe to talk to them. Originally, with the hope of collaborating with them on the film, but later on, just to get get some uh, first-hand accounts of what's happening in respective cities in the hot zones all over the world. So after talking to them, I think it helped me become even more confident about my creative approach, which is that even though this film is really about what Wuhan experienced, but I do firmly believe that people everywhere will be able to resonate with the story.
Did you? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was expecting a bit more of a political film, and I suppose I suppose every statement a storyteller or an artist or a filmmaker makes is could be classified as political, but I'm really not stunned but surprised by how personal once again and how human the film is. Not that politics isn't human, but I'm just wondering if you could give me some thoughts on that. Was that intentional? On your part to stay away from that newsy side of the story?
Not, I mean, later on it became more intentional, but as I said, the pandemic was evolving really fast. So in terms of my thinking around what story I was telling, what a story I wanted to tell, was also evolving really rapidly. So nowadays, whatever I tell you is probably like Monday morning quarterback. As I look back, try to retrace the evolution of my creative thinking. But that, as it happened, it was like day to day, or just making small adjustment. But and to be truthful, at the very beginning, I did want to do a more political piece. I really did want to investigate what was happening, what the government did, or the origins of of coronavirus, the outbreak. But as I was doing research, two things happened. One is I realized it's really hard to do true investigative reporting in Wuhan at that time, because the city was locked down, and there was really limited freedom of movement outside of anywhere in the city. And of all the investigative journalists I talked to, not only like domestic media but also international media like Wall Street Journal and New York Times, and very few of them actually now would be willing to go on camera to speak directly into the camera,
Wow.
be interviewed. So that's one. Secondly, the longer I read and also follow social media debates around the politics, right, the geopolitics of it, I feel like there's really nothing new I could add to the conversation. It's been so well documented, some of the early government cover-ups of what's happened in China, and also well documented, like the finger pointing between the Trump administration and China, shifting blames to each other. I'm like, if I include any of that in my film, I'm just regurgitating what any knowledge people would already have known. Uh, and in parallel, the more I understand the footage that my co-director have shot in Wuhan, the more I realize the power it's in the individuals,
Mm,
individual
it's
stories. So
great.
I did try to cut in some news clips, some news commentaries into the film. But anytime I bring something that's not observational, that's not directly on my character into the film, I feel somehow, yeah, you can say you make the film quote unquote bigger because it's talking about the political context of these individual human stories. But at the same time, I feel it diminishes the power of cinema somehow in this week, in this instance, which is like to sidetrack the viewer's intentions to guide it away from these precious human stories and try to guide them to in terms of to think about the bigger geopolitical questions. So in the end, I made this conscious decision to take everything out, just to let people just sit there and watch the actions of the characters and try to draw their own conclusion about, you know, their behaviors in those specific circumstances. And lastly, I think it's also an inspiration from all the Frederick Wiseman films. I rewatched as I was editing this film, and also some other really verite films. As I was editing this film, I definitely grew a deeper appreciation of verite film because it has its own special power. We don't have to spoon feed certain viewpoints to our viewers.
You expect a certain amount out of your viewer.
Yeah, and also just to let them focus on to yeah the human beings, to remind them COVID is not about statistics. It's not about all about politics. There's another side of the pandemic that sometimes we tend to ignore as we argue in media, either traditional media or social media, about COVID-19.
Yeah, it's good. It's interesting. You used the word draconian, and you don't hear that word too often. It's been a while since I've read Machiavelli's The Prince, but you used the word draconian. Recently, I read a piece about Australia and how they had, to some degree have been very successful keeping COVID out. And the word, sort of the phrase draconian measures was used. Clearly not the same here in the West, clearly not in the US, maybe a tiny bit more in Canada, but not by much. Some of the images you show in the film are cinematic and astounding and give me goosebumps. The shots of the empty streets, the ambulance on the bridge, the what would you call him? The folks that were basically cleaning the streets and spraying that one shot. I mean, these are powerful images. Do you think? I mean, is this just a silly question? But is that where we should have gone in the West? The heck with individual rights. How do you actually define freedom at that point? Freedom from the disease and the spread, or you know what I mean? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a question. It's really hard to answer. It's not
it's
like
very hard. I know.
Yeah, I try not. It's not like I don't want to answer. That question haunted me as I was making this film, right?
I bet.
And I think in the end, that's also part of the reason I decided not to talk about politics in this film, is because I feel like we're still living through this pandemic. For me to say whether the action adopted in Wuhan was right or wrong, or what percentage right, what percentage wrong,
right,
it's too early to say, right? First of
Agreed.
all. And secondly, each country or each society adopted its measure because of historical, political and societal and cultural reasons that it has gone down, taken certain measures in terms of responding to this pandemic. So I honestly don't know. Even after reading all the books about the past pandemics, even understanding how much we have learned about pandemics, how much we think we should know by now the right way, quote unquote, the right way to respond to a pandemic, we are still in the crappy situation we're in right now globally, right? So I just feel like it's too easy for me to say they did things right or wrong, but I don't think that's a responsible way at this stage yet.
Yeah, I think you're right about being too early. I loved how I think it was the character, but I'm going to affectionately refer to him as Grandpa. Maybe Bed 29, was it? And I think there's a conversation with his father over the phone, and we get to hear some of it. And he actually appeals to the fact you're a good party member. Just listen to what the doctors have to say.
Yeah, you have to set an example for every other patient in the hospital because you're a long-time party member. Yes.
I just thought that was the ironies abound, right? I mean, I thought that was really, really interesting. Are you, again, maybe, sometimes the questions I ask, I think on a certain level, they're really simple. And on other levels, I hope they peel back some layers. But are you a different filmmaker now? Will you be stepping into your next project in a different way as a result of not only the way this was co-directed and managed and so on, but you've really focused on that personal human component, different from before versus what's coming next?
I think 76 Days, in some ways, a continuation of my past work, which is, even though this is a newsy topic, but in the end, the film is really focusing on characters, on their behaviors, right? And so in that way, I haven't really departed from my creative interest. But in some other ways, in terms of the form, the documentary form, this time is really different. With All in My Family, my Netflix original short, it was a very personal documentary with, I'm both mostly behind camera, but also I was in front of camera with a lot of voiceover. With People's Republic Desire, it's like a Black Mirror sci-fi film with a lot of animation, graphics and special effects. But with this one, I went really, really pure. Tried, definitely no talking, has no music. It's just the raw power of the footage. So I'm really inspired by this new approach that I learned while doing 76 Days. So moving forward, obviously, I think I would like to make more pure verite films from now on. But, for every film, I like to try something different. It's really, really about what's best for the story and what's best for the footage I have access to.
How do you think that your film, and I'm assuming there will be others, but again, just want to focus on that human and community sort of based component. The way you end the film is absolutely beautiful. Sent shivers up my spine, goosebumps. The air raid siren, I believe, and just the group of shots you chose, how you communicated once again. We really are all in this, and everything else, we're in this together. And what does that mean for me now, for me going forward, and how I look at others and how I treat my family and so on. And I just love that about the documentary form. Do you think your film could help to heal some of that fake news, that the mismanagement of news, the divisions that continue to seem to fester all over the world, but particularly in the U.S. right now? That's for sure. Big question, and you're going to need to teach a university course on this one, I think.
Oh, come on, that's too big, I think, expectation on any filmmaker.
That's right.
I think as a filmmaker, as a storyteller myself, my ambition is actually pretty small. It's the reason I forced I told myself I had to finish this film was really personal. I feel like, as I mentioned, COVID-19 has become so personal. As I was editing this film, it was almost like a therapy, right?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So for myself, because I was watching, even though I was crying half the time when I was editing this film, but it was also cathartic. So in the end, the ending you mentioned, for me personally, my intention was it's a moment for collective grief, collective mourning. And for me, that was really important because for us to even to be able to move on, we have to pay respect to the departed, and to remind us that the only way we could live through this together is by working together, be kind to each other. But that's my personal hope. I honestly have no idea, and then how others will perceive this. And yeah, I mean, if this film could, you know, help move a few people and then let them see things a little differently, like you mentioned, for yourself, I'm already more than happy enough.
Yeah, I think, well, I think that's the beauty of any kind of art, really, isn't it? And I think most of the filmmakers I've interviewed over the years, most of the artists I've met, they don't necessarily make a piece or draw a piece or write a piece for others. It really is about themselves, right? It's personal. But ultimately, any great work, and I think yours goes on, I hope, to create empathy of one kind or another. And man, I think 76 Days has done that so beautifully. And I'm so glad you took out all those talking heads and all those experts, and just like you said, let the story and the image speak for itself. My wife Elizabeth and I were able to get to China years ago in 2000, and we went to Tianjin. Beijing's a huge city, as we both know, but here we are going to a smaller city than Beijing. And I think it was 11 million people or 9 million people at the time. And to see the impact and the way the country dealt with it, and the way, that there was still a sense of humor in the hospital, it's just such a beautiful thing. You captured it so well, and your team, you captured it so well. Do you want to make another movie that you direct from 10,000 kilometers away?
I've been enjoying this process. I feel like for me, I have interest in many different stories, right? So hopefully I'll be able to collaborate with different teams and to be able to produce more films faster. Yeah, that's definitely one of my goals.
More films faster. I like it. I like your style. You must have a pretty long to-do list. Listen, I've had such a pleasure chatting with you today, and I think this is one of those interviews for me that could go on for a long time. And I know you've got well, maybe not other places to go, but you certainly have other people to see in the near future. Tell us about. I'm going to be posting this interview very soon. The film's being released in a couple of days.
That's right.
Sort of globally, I believe, isn't it? Or
right now, it's only in North America, US
North
and
America,
Canada.
okay.
Yeah.
And then you've got plans to take over the world at some point?
Not take over the world. we do have sales agent, international sales agent, who's trying to find buyers for the film. I think I think Dog Wolf announced there have been sales in a few countries like
Great.
UK and some other European country. I can't remember at this point. Yeah, hopefully people will be able to see the film around the 1-year anniversary of the lockdown, which is January 23rd, 2021.
That would be amazing, and I hope so too. Hao, what a pleasure! Thank you for your time. We've been talking with Hao Wu about his brilliant and insightful new film, 76 Days. What a pleasure, Hao! Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, David, for the conversation, for having me.